Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 6th of June. Today we have a lot of interesting updates, so let's start. And today we're going to start with Sviatohirsk bridgehead, with this area. First of all, I would like to tell you that the Russian sources map has been updated. As you can see, the Russians have moved their front line, their green line, from Studenak towards Sviatohirsk. That means that down Studenak is under the Russians' control, according to the Russian information. If we take a look at the West sources map, you see that this town is still under the Ukrainians. This is the town. So what did happen today in this area? Now I'm planning to tell you the story that we heard from the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation. It is a very interesting story. According to the Ministry of Defense, the Ukrainians destroyed the bridge that connected Sviatohirsk-Studenak bridgehead with the big land. This is the bridge. And we know that this was the last bridge in this area that Ukrainians used for evacuation, for supply, support, for rotation, and so on. And this morning, this bridge was destroyed. According to the Ministry of Defense, this bridge was destroyed by barrage squads. The barrage squads are a type of troops whose main task is to prevent the withdrawal of troops located on the front line. As soon as the Ukrainian troops realized that they were cut off and abandoned by their command, they dropped all their weapons, all their tanks, all their heavy equipment, and fled through the forest along the river. The Russian side counted about 80 soldiers who tried to swim across the Sieverodonetsk river. We can say that there are still Ukrainian forces in the forest. We see that the Russians have updated their map. They marked Studenak as the town under their control, but they still haven't marked Sviatohirsk as the territory that under the Russians, because there are still Ukrainians. There are still a lot of Ukrainians. As far as I understand, they don't want to fight. They can't reach this side of the river because there are barrage squads here. So as far as I understand, they moved in the forest, and the Russian forces made them a proposal to retreat. So we'll see what's next. We will follow this situation. I must say that Studenak and Sviatohirsk doesn't change a lot on this bridgehead, because the main task and the main idea is to cross Sieverodonetsk river. The question is why the Ukrainians lost so many soldiers with this action, because we can understand the Ukrainians on this side of the river. They were abandoned and they were done because there was no way to escape, and the only one way is to cross the river on foot. And for now we understand what is expecting them on this side of the river, the prison, of course. So we'll see what's next. Now let's move on. According to the Ukrainian military authorities report, the Russians started bombing the area on the south of Lyman, this bridgehead. And I understand that the Russians need to cross the Sieverodonetsk river at least anywhere on this bridgehead, from Privilia towards Lyman. They need to cross the river somewhere, because the operation of encirclement of Lysychansk agglomeration without opening another front line somewhere here can be a little bit difficult. So we can say that something is happening there, and we're going to follow this situation, and maybe in a day or two, and maybe in a week, the Russians will try to do another attempt of crossing the river somewhere in this area. Now let's move to Sieverodonetsk, Lysychansk agglomeration. A few days ago I told you that there were a lot of situations, a lot of interesting stories from the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation, from the Ukrainian military authorities about chemical weapon, about counter-strike, about international legion. And I told you that the best solution for this situation is to wait a little bit. Yesterday we got some update regarding the counter-offensive operation towards Sieverodonetsk, because there was a really high risk that the Ukrainian forces that located in Sieverodonetsk industrial zone and Voronovo-Borivske might be encircled, and that counter-offensive operation was exactly for these purposes. And today we got more news Today, the governor of this area announced that the Ukrainians control just 20% of Sieverodonetsk. To be more precise, he announced that the Ukrainians controls just the industrial zone, this one. So we can say that the web sources map show us not correct information. We must say that entire area, this area, including Mitolkine, is under the Russian control. So this is the approximate situation in this area. I think that Sirotina, Voronovo, Borivska is still in the Ukrainians because today the Ukrainian military authority announced that the Russians were trying to attack Voronovo, Borivska, these two towns. So that means that this area is still under the Ukrainians. Another update about this area, according to the Ukrainian sources, the Ukrainians moved in this area their best forces. This territory, this Chansk agglomeration, is the most enforced group, the most enforced territory in entire Donbass. The Ukrainians moved here their special forces. They moved here their international legion. They moved here their international volunteers groups. So they are preparing for a very big and huge battle. So we'll see what's next and we'll follow this situation. Now let's move to the south, to the Girske-Zolote Toshkovka area. There were a few updates, very important updates in this area. And first of all is that the Russians, during this weekend, tried to establish control over two towns, Nikolaevka and Vrubivka. And according to the Russian sources map, if we take a look at this area from the Russian sources map, somewhere here near Nikolaevka, the Russian general was killed during the storm operation of Nikolaevka. If you remember, yesterday we discussed the goals of the Russians in this area, and I told you that the main goal of the Russians were to establish control over Nikolaevka and over Vrubivka. And we can say that the Russians are fighting for Vrubivka for a very long time, like few weeks, I think. And as far as I understand, it's very difficult to establish control over this town. So let's discuss and try to understand what is so difficult in establishing control over Vrubivka. And this is the reason why the Russians tried to attack Nikolaevka, and after that they're trying to encircle Vrubivka and attack Vrubivka from the back. So this is the main idea. Anyway, they need Vrubivka, but attacking the front is impossible. The only one way is to encircle Vrubivka and attack Vrubivka from the back. This is our bridgehead. So we can say that this is Vrubovka, this one to the right, this one, Vrubovka. This one, Nikolaevka. These two towns is under Ukrainians' control. Nirkova and these small villages, this is Kamyshevacha, this is Viktorovka, this is Nirkova. These three towns is under the Russians. Nikolaevka and Vrubovka is under the Ukrainians. If we take a look at this map, now we are watching from Nirkova, Viktorovka, Kamyshevacha, this one line, towards Nikolaevka, Vrubivka. Nirkova, Viktorovka, Kamyshevacha, Nikolaevka, Vrubivka. So a few weeks ago, the Russians tried to establish control over Vrubivka by attacking from Viktorovka and Kamyshevacha towards this. This was the line of their attack. They were trying to establish control over these suburbs, then to move through the forest towards Vrubivka. Maybe it wasn't even a real attack, it was some kind of commandos attack, Reco attack, and they tried to understand what are there, what are they going to face when they start the real attack. As far as I know, they understood that there was a lot of Ukrainian forces and that this area is very fortified. And it was impossible to establish control over Vrubivka using this line of attack, because if you are using this line of attack, the only type of forces you can use is artillery and the troops, soldiers, regular soldiers, without heavy tanks and heavy equipment. Because of forest, you see that if you're attacking towards Vrubivka, there is one line of defense, the second line, and the Vrubivka itself. So just using the soldiers, but it's some kind of suicide operation. So that's why the Russians moved to to the Lipovo-Nirkovo. So they moved here. They established control over Nirkovo, and the idea was to attack Nirkovo because there's just the fields, and you can use these fields as a broad front line and to attack Nirkovo using the tanks, heavy equipment, heavy armor, and that was the plan. So to attack using the fields with the broad front line Nikolaevka, and after that from Nikolaevka using the same fields attack this small like a farm, and from this farm to attack Vrubovka from the back. So this was the plan, and the Russian general came to Nirkovo, and they started this operation. He was killed. For now there is very heavy clashes there, very bloody clashes, and we are going to follow this situation. But I understand that this is a vital operation for the Russians for this week, and I think that by the end of this week or by the beginning of this weekend they're going to do this. And I'll remind you that there is a road. The main idea for the Russians is to establish control over this road, this white line. This road connects Girske-Zolote area with the big land, with Lysychansk agglomeration. So the Russians first tried to establish control over Vrubovka, then they tried, and this is what they are doing right now, is to establish control over Nikolaevka. Because establishing control over both these towns means that another line of supply and support in Girske-Zolote will be cut off. Now let's move to the west side of Popasna bridgehead, this area. There are very heavy clashes there. The Ukrainians attacked this area heavily. Their main idea is to deblocate this road. Furthermore, the Russians are trying to increase and develop their bridgehead in this area as well. And today the Ukrainian military authorities reported that the Russians activated their commandos and scouts group near Bilogorovka. So they want to establish control over Bilogorovka and Berestove and to cut off this line forever. Now let's move to Donetsk-Avdiivka area. This is the area. This is Donetsk. This is Avdiivka. Avdiivka industrial zone with its chemical plant. Donetsk is the capital of Donetsk People's Republic. And as you can see, there are a lot of icons of fire. You see, all these icons means that this is the result of shelling. So the Ukrainians, as you can see, the Ukrainians are shelling this town heavily. And mainly they're shelling the central part of the town. They're shelling the central part of the town where the most civilians are. And this is a very big problem for the Russians and for the people of Donetsk People's Republic. To tell the truth, I don't know what are they going to do. This is a very big castle. I don't think that there is a very fast and nice solution how the Russians can establish control over this town. Furthermore, according to the Ukrainian military authorities report, the Ukrainians moved here big reinforcement of tanks and heavy equipment. So as I understand, they are planning to protect this area for a very long time. And that means that they're planning to continue shelling Donetsk in the future as well. Furthermore, the Ukrainians did few attempts of counter-offensive operation towards Novoselovka-Drugaya. So this is a very powerful area and there is no fast solution. Furthermore, I would like to tell you that this is the area where the Russians are using their flights. They're in this area. They're using their Su-25 flights and use their uncontrolled rockets. They are not using their new aircraft machines in this area. Su-25 is the aircraft that was created in the 17th of the past century. Also, the Russians are using their Su-25s in the area of Toshkovka. The same here. So this also with the uncontrolled rockets. I would say that the Russians' tactics of using the air flights is very interesting. For example, the Russians are not flying over the Ukrainian territory. So they're flying just only over their territory. That territory is under their control. For example, if you take a look at this Su-25, this flight attack the Ukrainian position near Krasnogorovka. So what did they do? They started their flight somewhere in the east. They were flying somewhere in this area. They launched their uncontrolled missiles, and they turned right on the edge of the front line and then moved back. So the Russians are not flying over the Ukrainian territory. And I understand that they're not doing this because of the fact that Ukrainians have a lot of forces that they can use to destroy all the Russian flights. So this is the situation. And it's very bad for the Russians because they're bombing with the rockets the Ukrainian territory, but we see that the Ukrainians still have possibility to shut the Russians' flights down. Now let's move next. If we take a look at this part of front line, we can say that this part of front line is stable. There is no any attempts from both sides, so we can say that nothing happens here. More and more news are coming from Orekhov area and Gulyai-Pole area. For example, Zelensky announced today that they are very afraid of attack towards Zaporizhzhia and Dnipro from Orekhov area. So we can say, according to his words, that the Russians are collecting some forces here, and maybe in the near future, the Russians are planning to start their offensive operations towards Zaporizhzhia. I'm not sure that they're going to do this right now, but at least they force the Ukrainians to keep some reserves in this area as well. And that's the point. Now let's talk about Kherson area. This is our Kherson area. This is town Kherson, this is Kryvyi Rog, this is Mykolaiv, and this is the bridgehead where the main clashes are. If you remember, exactly a week ago, the Ukrainians did offensive operations towards David-Brody. The Ukrainians managed to cross this river and to establish control in this area. And that was the result of that bloody operation. According to information we have, the Ukrainians lost a lot of forces in this area. They lost a lot of vehicles, a lot of tanks, and so on. Today I read a very interesting report from the Russian side, and they described the situation from their side. So the situation was as follows. The Ukrainians managed to cross this bridge, David-Brody, and established bridgehead. The Russians pushed back and established their position on this area, so like a little bit far from David-Brody. The Ukrainians continue establishing and developing their bridgehead, and they got more and more positions in this town. A few days later, the Russians destroyed the only bridge in David-Brody, this one, and they cut off the Ukrainians that were on this side of this river. This is the river, Ingulets river, so you see this is the river. So with destroying of that bridge, the Ukrainian forces that were located here were totally cut off from the big land. And after that, the Russians started to bomb, started shelling this area heavily. And as a result of this operation, by this evening, by today, the Russians established entire control over David-Brody. So they pushed Ukrainians back. Not just push, because not many of Ukrainians managed to cross this river back. There were a lot of losses, and everybody who was in this artillery back were destroyed. Furthermore, according to this report, the Russians managed to establish control over this Bila Krynica. They crossed the river Ingulets. This is David-Brody, the bridge, and this area was the main bridgehead of Ukrainians for crossing the river. So the Russians crossed the river by themselves in this area, established control over Bila Krynica, and attacked the Ukrainians right in the back. So as a result of that operations, the Ukrainians lost entire bridgehead and lost more towns in this area. More updates are coming from Kherson from this area. As you know, the Ukrainians mined this pass between these two territories, between Achakov town and this national park. By the way, this national park is under the Russian control. So they mined everything here, and the Russians couldn't cross this area and to bring their ships in this gulf. So that's why the Ukrainians had possibilities to use this gulf with their ships. They have some small ship. They had a marine ship, and today the Russians managed to destroy the last marine ship in this area, Ukrainian. So that's why the Ukrainians can no longer cross this gulf and to send their forces to this park. And the Ukrainians use this area to move some commanders and scout, which did some attacks, some sabotage in this area. So this is the result of Kherson fightings. But I must say that Ukrainians are still collecting forces here, and I'm sure that in the very near future they will try to do another attempt of attacking towards Kherson and this bridgehead. Important update about this area from the Russian side. You know that the Russians are not enforcing this area with additional BTG. From one side, the Ukrainians are moving more and more BTGs towards this area, but the Russians are not doing this. But the Russians try to enforce their firepower in this area. And by the way, this is exactly the area where the Russians moved their T-62 tanks. So their main idea is to enforce this river from the side of their control, to put T-62 as much as possible, as close as possible, every single kilometer with this T-62, just for one reason: to enforce this bridgehead and to prevent any Ukrainians' attempt of counteroffensive operation towards this bridgehead. And that's it for today. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, and enjoy your evening. Bye bye.